Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas W1DED, and this is Q5 Ham Radio. In episode 2, Mark K1RX and I focus on understanding your QTH and station as it exists today, without assumptions or expectations. In this episode, we build on that snapshot by evaluating how both the station and the operator actually performed during a contest. We talk about identifying limitations, separating perception from reality, and creating a meaningful baseline for improvement. Q5 Ham Radio is supported by DX Engineering, helping operators make smart, measurable progress. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be back again, Kevin.
So tell me what we hope to cover in this episode.
Well, I think now that we've done that evaluation of your station and you got an idea of how things are kind of working because you played around in a few contests and you've got a list now developed, this is the time to start, prioritizing or doing a little deeper dive on that list. And you want to look at the things that can give you the best return on investment. Now, someone who's never really considered that, what is the best return on investment on some of these lists or items on the list? Well, we all know antennas have a huge effect. In fact, for anyone who's been in the hobby any length of time, they've heard the expression, if you've got $10, how do you divide the money between the equipment, the antennas, and other things? And it always ends up being close to maybe $1 or $2 on the radio, but $8 on the antenna. That's where you want to put your money, and that's where you'll get your biggest return on investment. And that can be in multiple forms. I mean, that's probably the easiest and the most gratifying aspect of the things that one can do in the hobby relative to making improvements or addressing the different elements within, a given station. Antennas, number one. And you can do that very cheaply, DIY projects, spend very few dollars, go to flea markets, find little bits and pieces enough to make an antenna. And, or you can go out and spend the big bucks, big Yaggies, big towers, and whatever. Sure, that's going to get you there a little further. But most of us started at the wire level. The simple, we're on a minimum budget. A lot of cases, maybe a high school student that, I have a job, but it doesn't pay very much. And I can't really go out and spend money on big antennas and towers and stuff. So what can I do? So you have to make that, determination, of course. As a result, and like most of us went through, it becomes a huge learning experience. There's nothing better than putting up, say, 2 antennas and one, say, fixed in one direction and one fixed in another direction. And you have the immediacy of just switching from one to the other and then listening to the results. You hear somebody in Europe, S9, you flip the switch. Somebody on the West Coast in W6 land, California, something, S9. Where did the European go? They were on the same frequency, and it was like 2 complete bands. It's incredible. But you get those little kicks of adrenaline, I guess one could call it, that just keep you stimulated and keeps feeding the passion. You're like, hey, that was simple. I just put up a couple of antennas and look at the immediate results I got. So it's things like that clearly they have a big boost to the score, the opportunity to boost the score. You're looking for like step function score improvements. Made maybe 1,000 points in this contest last year. I'd like to try and double that. Well, how do I double that? Well, you look at the rules, you figure out, you look at your log from last time, and you kind of do an analysis, and you figure out, what can I improve, or what 1 or 2 things could I do that could make a nice difference? Maybe it's another antenna. Like, I noticed I couldn't get certain parts of the world like we were talking about before. So you make some improvement in that area, put an antenna dedicated to that region if you can. I know, obviously, all of us have some kind of a constraint, property, you've got a postage size lot, or maybe you're blessed to have, 100 acres. But how you apply that, that resource to this problem, that's entirely up to you. And of course, you're going to get different results. Like all of us started in a very low-cost, mindful way in this hobby. You try and make the most of what you got and just enjoy the results. And that's probably the best way to address that. But also interesting is when you got these contests that occur every year, same time every year, you can actually do some planning. Let's think about this for a moment. You've done your, say 1 year of evaluating your station, and we're talking about episode 2. Like, let's take a snapshot. Well, that snapshot could be over a time period of a year or two. Or if you really want to think about it properly, it's a lifelong experience evaluating what you've got. You're always evaluating. But to be able to, okay, I've got some experience now in certain contests, and I notice I was doing well here. So the ones I'm doing well, I like those. Those are fun because I get nice results. But what can I do in that contest to make it even more enjoyable? Maybe it's another antenna. Maybe I should make the investment and buy an amplifier. Up till now, I've been running 100 watts, having a blast. I make 200 or 300 contacts on a weekend. That's fantastic. I'd like to bring that up, just personally challenge myself to do a little bit better. So I look at it from an incremental improvement position. And that's what this whole thing is. It's incremental. And once you adapt that in your basic thinking, it suddenly becomes a lifelong experience. Now, here I sit 60 years in this hobby, and I can't think of a lot of people that have been in a hobby that long and still have the same kind of passion, if not more, to keep things going. And that's the beauty of this whole incremental process and the contesting aspect. Well, I don't know if you wanted to make mention here of the receive capability. I told you that was an important thing. How well can you hear? If you're turning on your equipment and you're hearing just S9 garbage across the spectrum, wow, you've got some work ahead of you to go figure out where those sources are and how to mitigate. And it could be as simple as that wall wart that's charging your computer on the wall 5 feet from your radio that's causing all of that interference. But you don't know that until you start to explore and figure out where these noise sources are. And then you can start to address, how to fix them. It might be just, for the weekend, I'm going to unplug my computer. Problem solved. That would be nice. But in other cases, it may be a neighbor, causing issues. They've got a touch lamp. I've experienced that personally, where I had a noise issue coming from a touch lamp from a house that was 2 doors away, maybe 200 or 300 feet away. And it was causing interference on a certain segment of the band that I was interested in operating for that weekend. Well, surprise, surprise, this thing was an old touch lamp, and the thing was actually not even turned on, and it was generating noise. It was just plugged in, but not turned on. It was the craziest thing I'd ever experienced. And every time you touched the light, to change the brilliance of it, it would shift 25 kilohertz up and down the band. It was the craziest thing ever. In that little episode, I found out that the owner of the house, his father was a ham. And so he was already kind of familiar with the things that go on here. And he said in the end, it's like, tell you what, sounds like this would be a great thing for you to take and maybe demonstrate to your local radio club how a touch lamp can cause this kind of interference. So it became a demonstration piece at a local radio club, but to show that. But at any rate, you need to track down all these noise sources as best you can, and from that, you're going to get a sense of how well things are working. But taking it one step further, aside from just understanding your own station and how quiet it is or not quiet, pursue visiting other stations, other hams in the neighborhood, or go through your radio club if you have one, and reach out to some of the ones that seem to be pretty active on the bands that you're interested in, HF, whatever, and ask if you could just come over and just do some listening. And then you kind of get in your mind the difference. I've had people come to my house and operate contests. I do a fair amount of training of new people in this sport. And a lot of times they're just absolutely astounded how quiet it is. They can hear all these signals calling, where at their own house, they're listening to some S6 noise level that's masking all of those people calling. And you're just missing out on so much. Plus, you're frustrating the people on the other end who are calling you and can't understand why you're not answering. It's because you've got a problem at your station. But by doing that and getting that, knowledge in your head or the comparative knowledge, then you can kind of see what the real world is all about out there and how you should address it. So you want to try and visit other people. If somebody says, hey, come visit my station, you're new in the hobby, let me show you. In fact, I would encourage everybody out there to do that, particularly with the new hams. New hams, they generally have no idea what's required or not required, but what they should start with or what their own location could translate to as far as local noise or other issues. Invite them to your place. Show them what a working, good, reasonable quality, however you want to phrase it, station is, and give them the opportunity to listen around. And then say, hey, let's go back to your place and listen and see what you're up against. And then we can put some strategy together to figure out how to mitigate that. But that's a huge opportunity you want to take advantage of, go visiting other people.
So, Mark, for the listeners, let's say there's an S6, there's a noise issue. Where would that person start to look? You obviously found the offending lamp, but what is the process one should go through to, first of all, eliminate that it's something in your own home or with your own mechanicals?
Fairly simple, I think. You start with addressing your own house or your own station. Ideally, you put your radio, your receiver on batteries, and so it's completely, separate from the power of the house. And you, step by step, start shutting off breakers or shutting off fuses or something to see if you can hear the difference in the noise. I've seen some videos out there that actually have tried to describe that process. And what I found kind of somewhat amusing was they were listening to just normal band noise. And they were trying to see if they could reduce the band noise. It struck me as kind of odd that they would be pursuing that. In my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, here's a noise source. It's like a popping noise, or it's driving my S meter to 20/9, and it's a very steady thing, and it only seems to happen on certain frequencies or things like that, but it's well above the band noise. That's the problem. That's the offending issue, not the band noise. That's my interpretation. So you want to, systematically, scientifically, as best you can, kind of shut things off and figure out where a noise may be coming from. When we did that search for that offending lamp, initially I thought it was a barn. There was a nearby barn to the house, and it was a 2-story affair. And as it turned out, or initially I thought maybe there's a wire that's overheating in this barn. And in fact, they had horses. In fact, that was kind of my lead to how I even got the conversation going, where I told the owner, I think there's a problem maybe in your barn. And of course, their question is, well, how would you know that? I said, well, I'm into radio and I can track signals, and I kind of tracked it down to, or zeroed it in on your barn. It seems like there's something going on in your barn that's causing this noise, and it could potentially be a fire hazard. And to, of course, immediate response, like, how soon can you come over and let's see if we can find the problem? Well, it turned out it had nothing to do with the barn, but that lamp was generating noise throughout the entire wiring system in the house. And it just happened that the 20 feet of wire, house wire in that barn, vertically polarized, was affecting my vertically polarized antenna, and that's where the noise was. I didn't fully explain all of that back then, but I had a horizontal antenna, a dipole. I couldn't hear the noise on that, but on the vertical, which was my prime antenna for this particular contest, it was obnoxious. I couldn't believe it. So that's what led me to that vertical piece of wire. Well, it turned out in the end that wasn't even it, but it was an amazing way to learn, what's going on. So that's certainly one thing. Once you've convinced yourself that your noise or whatever noise is out there is not coming from your house, then the more challenging part might be to go explore the neighborhood.
And is that walking to each of your neighbors' houses with a radio on a battery,
Yes.
just checking to see if the noise level increases?
Absolutely. If you can do that without, somebody objecting to you being on their property, that's always the tricky part.
Seems to me the tricky part is make sure you have a good relationship with your neighbors to begin with.
Absolutely.
Before you knock on that door, right?
Yeah, you want to, well in advance of that, let them know that, I'm an amateur radio operator living in your neighborhood, and of course all the intrinsic value that we bring to the community, in terms of emergency preparedness or service or communications and all of that theme, is liberally applied to the neighborhood, and they understand that, hey, if something goes wrong, I could probably get some results by talking to Mark down the street. That's a nice way to kind of level set that relationship. But once you've established that, and then you come back to them and say, hey, I think there's something going on. Do you mind I, kind of help explore, or can we help work together and explore what this might be? And a lot of times you get a pretty good reception. There have been instances where a friend of mine had a noise source suddenly pop up on 20 meters, and it only seemed to peak out of the southwest as he turned his antenna. And he did a little driving around the neighborhood, and it turned out about 3 blocks over, this one house was really emitting a lot of noise, and it was the same noise because he was listening with the same radio. And went to the door, knocked on the door, and long story short, the assumption here was it was probably grow lights for marijuana plants, and they're notorious for generating noise on the ham bands. And at any rate, one mention of that, the response was, well, I don't know, but I'll talk to my son, see what's going on. Well, magically, the noise went away within a day. I think they got a little nervous. That conversation can go in a lot of different ways. But getting back to this issue of, tracking down noise, that's a key thing. And again, if you can't hear them, you can't work them. And that's a critical thing in this whole process.
Mark, I want to take you briefly back to the idea of antenna improvement. You said 80% of the budget really ought to be put into antennas. I've got to say, I've always been envious of people that seem to know exactly what they need on that tower. And I presume that comes from years of experience and talking to their friends. Yeah. But, we're back to a new contester. How do you know which way to go? There are so many antenna options out there. How does a new contester know which direction to go in?
Ideally, consult with people that have been playing this game for a while. They can give you some good ideas. But the real beauty in this aspect is the experimentation. This is where you personally get to learn what's working and what can work for you and what may not work. But you don't know that until you try it. For me, I have I've had conversations with people that say, well, you've got to check this out, on the computer, do the modeling and come up with a reasonable antenna selection or a solution. And I look at it as my property can't support a full-blown exact model of that the computer's telling me I should make. So I'm going to have to compromise. It's going to be a little bit closer. It's going to be a little bit shorter. It's going to have something. But the bottom line here is I put it up anyway. I don't care. I put it up anyway, and I tried it. I compared it. And if it surprised me that it actually worked. Maybe not as efficiently or as optimally as the computer model might share, but it worked for what I was looking to do. It was fantastic. But that's really the issue, is get out there and experiment and try different things. But yeah, ideally you don't want to waste a lot of time, but that's half the fun, quite honestly, is playing around with different things. I know people that have been playing the contest game with only wires, and that's all they have, wires up in trees, and they've had incredible results, incredible. A lot of factors go into that, of course, but they've been able to come up with solutions, very low cost, all based on simple wires, and that put them in the game. And they're having fun. They're achieving whatever goal they've set for themselves, and that's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I feel like this takes us back to something we talked about in an earlier episode, that you need to start from where you are. Mm-hmm. Don't set the expectations so high toward perfection that you never do it. Start somewhere, make notes, and make improvements. It's a long game.
There are There have been experiences where people have tried to essentially plug and play, spend whatever money, they've got, the max is okay, put up this enormous station, and then they're kind of disappointed in the end that it didn't really work. I didn't win the competition I was looking to get into. I did okay, but there was something missing. Okay, what's missing is those years of, trying different things, growing in this whole thing, this whole process of, this iterative process that you go through in building a competitive station. And if you're missing all that, you're just not going to do it. Like I say, a couple of people I know in particular have gone out and spent all kinds of money to do this with the expectation they're going to win. And surprise, surprise, they didn't do it. And, whatever happened after that, I don't know. But it's an unfortunate situation. I really encourage, do it the way everybody started. We all started the same way with simple stuff, and we worked our way up the chain. And here we are, whatever level you call, here we are.
Mark, we spent a lot of time talking about antennas, both transmit, receive, we talked about noise levels. What other factors should we be thinking about to make improvements on?
Well, the other end, other than antennas, logging programs, you want to find something that's comfortable, that's got all the features. And of course, what features do I need? Well, again, consult with people that are using different programs. See if you can arrive at a reasonable conclusion that says, this looks like a good starting point. And like in so many things in life, pick a direction. Whatever direction you pick, the worst case scenario is you have to turn 180 degrees compared to someone that has no idea which direction they want to go, and they're looking at full 360 degrees. Which direction do I go? And they never go. They never make that first move. So it doesn't matter. Pick a direction based on whatever your experience, knowledge, and mentorship has given you this, level of information to make that decision. And as you go, be prepared to make changes. You may discover that, hey, there's better programs out there, better radios out there. For years in all my multi-op contesting, I was just totally locked on a certain model, and I thought they were great until one of my operators showed up with a different or a newer radio and started using that. And lo and behold, it was an incredible difference. I could hear so much better. And, back to that receiving thing again. I could hear so much better. And it's that's it. I'm standardizing on that new radio. Or I'd encourage people to show up with that radio. If I couldn't afford it, I'd have the operators come with their own equipment. And that's how we did it. And beyond that, it's, just general operating, getting that experience, getting used to the program, practice running stations. By that, I mean calling CQ. People are answering you at a steady pace. Try to work toward, efficiencies. Think about being fluent in phonetics. When you're driving down the street and you see a street sign, you're reading that sign, stop, or whatever it might be. Think of it in terms of Sierra, Tango, Oscar, Papa, phonetics. And get it to the point where you can literally speak almost 100% in phonetics. Because when you're operating a phone contest and you get a pile up of people calling you, you want to be able to come back with a language that you're comfortable with, and that's that phonetic language. Or maybe use the same phonetics that the person who called you used, because they can more easily relate. If they used X-ray Charlie Papa and you would prefer to use X-ray Canada Pacific, maybe it's easier just to repeat what the phonetics were used from that person. Though that's all part of the control of the pileup kind of activity. But phonetics, that's a big thing. And you want to get very, very fluid in that, in the usage of that. And same with code speed, Morse code sending. You want to, at some point, maybe get to 30, 35 words a minute and be comfortable at that level. I mean, a lot of people maybe are still struggling with code. That's okay. You'll get there. Practice, practice, practice. Operate contests. A lot of times people will just simply slow down for the slower person. But you're hearing the code coming at you at a higher speed, and you're seeing the call that's being presented. So you can start improving your code speed, quite honestly, by listening to the higher speed people, and at the same time you're looking at what that person's transmitting. So that's a great way to do it. But back to the antenna theme we were talking. I've seen over the years probably the best way to address antenna improvements or how to make changes in your station is, if at all possible, keep the reference or keep the original antenna that you may have put up the first time, your first multiband dipole or multiband vertical or whatever you started with. Maybe at some point you might want to change that. But the point I'm getting to is, if you use that as a reference, a point of comparison to anything new you put up, could be a receiving antenna, although that might be a little different, but certainly another transmitting antenna, and you compare it to your multiband dipole at 30 feet, the best you could do at the time, that is going to be tremendous. Think about this in terms of making an A-B comparison. You have the ability to literally every moment of every day on maybe the different bands immediately make comparisons to that reference antenna. It's going to tell you a couple of things. It's going to tell you the antenna that's being evaluated, or the one that you're hoping is going to be a tremendous success. You may find, it's not working as well as my reference. And I knew how my reference antenna worked for the years or months that I've been playing with that. I know kind of the limitations of that. But this new antenna, I have, it's new and I have no idea, but I have a reference I can compare. What's also nice is, during the course of your exploration of new antennas, and say you've established 4 new antennas you want to try out, you're always going back to that reference antenna. Why? Because it's confirming that the new antenna is still working like it was, because now you've accumulated some experience on the new, and you can immediately compare always back to the reference. And that will give you an immediate situation awareness that something's wrong on that antenna. Maybe it fell down and you didn't even realize it. You had all this expectation at the beginning of the contest, or Thursday before the weekend. You start listening around and suddenly you discover, my best antenna that I just put up and I spent all summer putting up, it's not working. It's weaker compared to my reference. And I knew that was a terrible antenna, but this is even worse. So, big red flag. Okay, I got to get out there and do something. So that is an absolutely critical thing. And I like to think of using the antenna switch in this exercise. If anything, try and wear out that switch. You're thinking millions of operations of that switch. It could be a simple toggle switch, but doesn't matter. It's always going to give you an immediate day-by-day comparison. Each day is different with propagation. Maybe that new antenna doesn't work quite the same during a low sunspot time as compared to when the band's wide open. Maybe it has a certain pattern to it that you didn't realize, but you can see it by comparing it to the other antenna. There's so many things you can learn just by having a simple reference antenna. So absolutely, if at all possible, keep up that original antenna at your property.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate the theme here in episode 3. We started the series with why contest is interesting and why people may want to pursue it. And then in episode 2, we talked about having the fundamentals. And the message here in episode 3 is loud and clear. Antennas, antennas, antennas. Certainly the noise elimination is part of that, but we're still going back to antennas. So I also love what you're putting out there, that there's not one solution. This is a lifetime of improvements and paying attention and flipping that switch. So Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me again.
My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. This has been Q5 Ham Radio, episode 3 in my contesting series with Mark K1RX. Please stay tuned for episode 4, 73.